Imagine a story not just of wealth or betrayal, but of a deeper kind of fortune. The kind measured not in money, but in true loyalty, courage, and unexpected friendship. Today, I invite you to listen to an extraordinary tale of trust tested and loyalty unveiled. One where a single voice, seemingly small and unimportant, changed the course of a billionaire's life. This story is woven with hard lessons on friendship and deception, of power and humility, and the reminders of the kindness and bravery hidden in places we least expect. In this narrative, you'll meet Lucas, a man with more riches than he could ever spend, but little understanding of who he could truly trust, and Sarah, a waitress with a sharp mind and a compassionate heart, who stepped forward with information that would forever alter Lucas's path. This journey is one of moral lessons and the powerful impact one person's courage can have on those around them. Sarah was a waitress with a simple life, but she had something far rarer than most people: a watchful eye and a sincere compassion for people. In her modest diner job in the heart of Chicago, she served coffee, took orders, and went largely unnoticed. But Sarah had an instinct, an unexplainable gift for noticing the details around her, picking up on patterns others would dismiss as insignificant. She observed life from a unique perspective, one that allowed her to see things beyond the superficial. To many, she was just a cheerful waitress, but to those who really knew her, Sarah was someone who genuinely cared for the people who came in and out of her life, if only for a few minutes at a time. One evening, as she was clearing tables, Sarah's sharp ears caught a conversation that sent chills down her spine. A man at the table in the far corner was leaning in close, his voice just barely audible over the hum of the diner. This man was Josh, a name she'd heard murmured before, always with a certain reverence or respect. He was, after all, a close friend to Lucas, the billionaire who frequented the city on business. Josh was known as Lucas's right-hand man, someone privy to his secrets, his fears, and most importantly, his plans. But what Sarah overheard that night shattered the image of Josh as a loyal confidant. In hushed tones, Josh spoke to another man about an elaborate scheme, something that involved getting to Lucas before he finalized his latest deal, a major acquisition that, from what Sarah gathered, was supposed to be transformative for Lucas's business. Josh's words were chilling. He seemed calm, almost too comfortable in his plotting, as though betraying Lucas was merely another transaction in his day. The man on the other end of the conversation nodded, clearly in agreement, as they discussed how they'd stop Lucas from signing the deal and ultimately benefit from the fallout. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Lucas was no stranger to the world of powerful friends and silent enemies, but from what she'd observed, he had always trusted Josh implicitly. They were not just colleagues but friends, bound by years of shared ambition and achievement. How could Josh, Lucas's confidant, his advisor, the person he'd relied on time and again, be planning such a ruthless betrayal? Sarah's heart raced. The weight of this secret felt crushing, yet she couldn't shake the thought. If she said nothing, Lucas would suffer immensely. But if she spoke up, would anyone even believe her? Would Lucas, a man surrounded by a fortress of influence, even listen to the words of a mere waitress? But Sarah had something stronger than fear. She had a sense of responsibility, a rare trait that had always compelled her to act when others wouldn't. As she finished clearing the table, her mind whirled with the possibilities, the outcomes, and the potential consequences of her interference. She could lose her job, be dismissed, or worse, be ignored completely. Yet something in her gut, a feeling she couldn't shake, told her that if she didn't at least try to warn Lucas, she'd never forgive herself. Taking a deep breath, Sarah decided that the risk was worth it. She waited until she was sure that Josh and his companion had left, and then she carefully approached Lucas's table the next morning, nervous but resolved. Lucas sat alone, sipping his coffee as he skimmed through documents, likely oblivious to the storm brewing right beneath his feet. Sarah hesitated, but she knew this was her only chance. Clearing her throat, she finally gathered her courage and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Lucas. I think there's something you should know." Lucas looked up, surprised. his piercing gaze settling on her with a hint of curiosity. Sarah's heart pounded, but she pressed on, recounting every detail she'd overheard, her voice trembling but clear. She told him about Josh's scheme, about the betrayal she sensed, and about her gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she spoke, she saw a flicker of doubt cross Lucas's face, his eyes narrowing as he processed her words. She could tell he was wary, skeptical even, but she also noticed a spark of concern. Lucas's initial reaction was understandable. Here was a young waitress, someone far removed from his world, with no clear motive except a sincere warning. It sounded outlandish, even absurd, that his trusted friend could be plotting against him. And coming from a waitress, it was easy to dismiss. Lucas had grown accustomed to people trying to sway him, influence him for their gain, and Sarah was an unknown someone who, in his eyes, might just be meddling. But as she finished, there was something in her voice, a ring of authenticity, that stuck with him. Sarah could see his hesitation, the battle within him to dismiss her words and move on. But she also saw the moment he decided to take her seriously, however small that decision might have been. Lucas thanked her politely, his face unreadable, and she returned to her duties, uncertain whether her warning had made any difference at all. She'd done her part, she reasoned, and now it was up to Lucas. What Sarah didn't know was that her words would gnaw Lucas all day, leaving him restless, uneasy, and doubtful of his closest friend. That night, as he reviewed the contract he was set to sign the next morning, her warning echoed in his mind, preventing him from moving forward with the same ease as before. As he sat in his office, surrounded by walls filled with memories of his career, he realized he couldn't simply ignore what she'd said. The risk was too great, and if there was even a sliver of truth to her warning, he needed to know. With a heavy heart, Lucas decided to postpone the deal, giving himself time to investigate further. He was a man accustomed to following his instincts, and something in Sarah's earnest plea had struck a chord he couldn't ignore. Perhaps she was right, or maybe she was wrong, but either way, he owed it to himself to uncover the truth. And so, Lucas embarked on a journey he never anticipated, one that would reveal the darker side of friendship, loyalty, and trust. Little did he know that this path would test not only his faith in others, but his very sense of identity and values. And as for Sarah, her act of courage was only the beginning of her journey, a journey that would ultimately change her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. What Lucas would soon discover would leave him questioning everything he thought he knew. In the next chapter, we'll witness Lucas's confrontation with the truth, as he begins to unravel the hidden intentions lurking beneath the surface of his closest alliances. Stay with us as the story of trust and betrayal deepens, revealing the true cost of loyalty. In the days following Sarah's warning, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over him. Her words, though from an unexpected source, had stirred something within him, a faint but persistent feeling that he'd ignored for too long. As he sat alone in his office, he thought about the moments he'd shared with Josh over the years. They had started their careers together, building from scratch. And for Lucas, Josh was more than a partner. He was family. So why was he now feeling a need to protect himself from a man who had stood by him through so much? Lucas had always been a meticulous man, a quality that contributed to his success. He didn't make moves hastily. He calculated, considered, and only acted when he was sure. His reputation as a careful, discerning businessman was both a strength and, as he was now beginning to suspect, a vulnerability. People like Josh, who understood his cautious nature, could use that trust against him, assuming he would never see it coming. The irony weighed heavily on him, but he knew that if there was any truth to Sarah's warning, he needed proof. Late one evening, Lucas reached out to a trusted private investigator. The man, a seasoned professional named Paul Withers, had been recommended years ago by a reliable source, though Lucas had never had to use his services before. Discretion is paramount, Lucas insisted as he briefed Paul, detailing the reason for his inquiry but leaving Sarah's name out of it. Paul nodded, understanding the importance of confidentiality, and assured Lucas that he would uncover whatever needed to be found. They agreed to meet again in a few days. Once Paul had gathered initial information, the waiting was agonizing. Every time Lucas saw Josh or received a call from him, he felt a strange disconnect, as if he were speaking to a stranger. Josh's laughter, his casual remarks, even his gestures, all seemed suddenly foreign. Lucas started to see things he hadn't noticed before. A certain smugness in Josh's smile, a subtle condescension when they discussed plans. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a side of his friend that he hadn't been willing to see. And perhaps that was the hardest truth of all, that he'd chosen not to see it for so long. Days passed, and just as promised, Paul returned with findings that would forever change Lucas's view of the world and of Josh. Paul's report was thorough, detailing every aspect of Josh's recent dealings. It wasn't just suspicion. Paul had found concrete evidence of betrayal. Josh had set up offshore accounts, diverting funds in ways that hinted at a long-term strategy of deceit. He had made calculated moves to isolate Lucas within his own company, subtly influencing key players and decision-makers. Josh had been constructing a coup in silence, carefully plotting to make sure that when Lucas fell, there would be no one left to support him. The report detailed emails, bank transfers, and suspicious meetings that Paul had painstakingly tracked. Each line, each piece of evidence, was a nail in the coffin of Lucas's trust in Josh. The full scope of Josh's betrayal hit him like a wave, filling him with a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. This wasn't just business. It was deeply personal. For a man like Lucas, who valued loyalty above all, the realization was shattering. He could hardly fathom that the man he'd trusted implicitly had been undermining him all along, planning to take over his company, his life's work, without a shred of remorse. Lucas sat in silence for what felt like hours, absorbing the weight of Paul's findings. He thought back to the beginning, to the days when he and Josh had struggled together, dreaming of the success they now enjoyed. What had gone wrong? Had he missed the signs all along? Or had Josh changed over the years, corrupted by ambition and jealousy? In truth, it was probably a combination of both. Lucas realized now that success had a way of attracting both loyalty and resentment, and perhaps he'd been too idealistic to recognize the latter. There was, however, a sense of clarity that accompanied the pain. Sarah's warning had opened his eyes, forcing him to confront an unpleasant reality. He knew now what he had to do, though it would be one of the hardest things he'd ever faced. Confronting Josh wouldn't just be a business move. It would be a confrontation of ideals, of principles, and of the very foundation of their friendship. But Lucas also knew he had no choice. The betrayal was too great, too deep to overlook. He couldn't simply move forward pretending nothing had happened. The night before his planned confrontation with Josh, Lucas found himself reflecting on the moments that had defined him. Not the achievements, not the deals, but the moments of humility, the friendships, and the hard choices. He remembered the old diner where he and Josh used to meet in the early days, discussing their dreams over cups of cheap coffee. Back then, there were no secrets between them, just two friends with big dreams. How far they'd come, and how far they'd fallen. It was a painful irony that the man he'd once called a brother would now be his adversary. That night, Lucas decided he would meet Josh alone in a place that held the weight of their shared history. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about having an honest, unguarded conversation. One last time, before he made the final decision about their future. The next day, Lucas arranged for a quiet private meeting with Josh in an old conference room, one where they had celebrated some of their earliest victories. The room felt different, now no longer a place of camaraderie, but rather one of somber confrontation. As Josh entered, Lucas could see a hint of discomfort in his eyes, a flicker of guilt perhaps, or maybe just fear of what Lucas might say. With a heavy heart, Lucas looked Josh directly in the eye and laid out the evidence. He didn't shout, didn't accuse with anger, but his voice held a firmness that couldn't be ignored. "Why, Josh?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, but loaded with the weight of betrayal. "We built this together. I trusted you like family." Josh's face twisted. a mixture of shame and defiance. He tried to deny at first, feigning ignorance, but as Lucas presented piece after piece of undeniable evidence, Josh's defenses crumbled. Finally, he looked down, a bitter smile on his face. "You've always had everything, Lucas," he muttered, bitterness lacing his words. "The respect, the power, the admiration. I was always in your shadow. I'm tired of being second to you." Lucas listened, feeling a strange sense of pity amid his anger. This wasn't just about business for Josh. It was a deeply personal grudge, fueled by years of envy and resentment. Lucas had never realized how much his success had come to symbolize something painful for his friend. Yet, he couldn't let that excuse the betrayal. Envy was one thing, but deceit and betrayal, those were choices Josh had made. And choices came with consequences. As the confrontation drew to a close, Lucas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced the truth, painful as it was, and now he had a clear path forward. The friendship he once cherished was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. Josh was no longer a friend but a foe. And though the decision was heartbreaking, it was also liberating. For Lucas, this moment marked a turning point, a painful shedding of old loyalties that no longer served him. Lucas left that room with a sense of resolve, determined to protect what he had built and to move forward with a renewed commitment to integrity and transparency. But one thing was certain: he would never forget Sarah's warning, her courage in speaking up when others might have stayed silent. In his heart, he knew he owed her a debt of gratitude, one he intended to repay in ways more meaningful than words. Lucas may have uncovered the truth, but the journey is far from over. In the next chapter, we delve into his investigation, where deeper secrets are revealed, unraveling the extent of Josh's betrayal. Stay tuned as we follow Lucas's quest for justice and the difficult choices that lie ahead. After his confrontation with Josh, Lucas felt as though he were standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss of betrayal that ran deeper than he had anticipated. The evidence of deception was stark, but a new and more unsettling question arose. How far did this betrayal go? Was it simply envy and resentment that had driven Josh to such extremes? Or was there an even darker scheme behind his actions? Determined to unearth the full truth, Lucas once again contacted Paul Withers, the private investigator. Their first meeting had laid the groundwork, but this time Lucas wanted Paul to dig even deeper. He instructed him to look not only into Josh's actions, but also into anyone else who might be involved. If Josh had managed to build this scheme in secrecy, then perhaps he hadn't done it alone. Days turned into weeks, and each day brought new insights, new discoveries, each one more troubling than the last. Lucas was astonished at the web of deceit and the level of calculation Josh had employed. What Paul uncovered revealed not just a betrayal of trust, but a comprehensive plan to dismantle Lucas's entire empire. Josh had positioned himself strategically over the years, aligning with key members within the company and gradually amassing influence in places Lucas had never thought to question. The scope of Josh's betrayal was astonishing and left Lucas questioning everything and everyone around him. The report from Paul was extensive, detailing transactions that were carefully disguised under shell companies and offshore accounts. Josh had been siphoning funds from Lucas's businesses, laundering the money through a network of accounts that, until now, had gone undetected. Every transfer, every financial maneuver was methodically planned, executed with the precision of someone who understood the inner workings of Lucas's financial empire. Josh hadn't simply betrayed a friend. He'd stolen millions quietly and efficiently, all while maintaining a facade of loyalty. Paul's investigation didn't stop at financial records. His team of experts began to monitor Josh's communications and movements, observing who he met, who he spoke to, and how often. What they found revealed that Josh had, in fact, been collaborating with a few other members within Lucas's company. They were individuals Lucas had trusted implicitly, people he'd celebrated with at company events, people who had shared his vision. It was almost too much to bear. These were colleagues he had invested in, people he had elevated and supported over the years. Their loyalty, he had assumed, was as firm as his own. The discovery stung, cutting deeper than he could have imagined. One evening, as Lucas pored over the latest findings, he came across a name that he hadn't expected. A senior accountant, a woman named Helen who had been with the company for over a decade, was mentioned in several communications with Josh. Helen had always been diligent, hardworking, a pillar within his financial team. She'd never given him any reason to doubt her loyalty. And yet, here she was, entangled in Josh's plans. Emails and financial records showed that Helen had been covering for Josh's transactions, disguising them as routine business expenses, and sometimes even forging signatures to pass off suspicious transfers as legitimate. The betrayal was like a punch to the gut. Lucas was torn between his desire for justice and his disbelief at the magnitude of deception around him. Each layer of the conspiracy revealed a deeper, more pervasive disloyalty that he could hardly fathom. To think that people he had trusted implicitly were so deeply involved left him feeling isolated, as though the walls were closing in. These were individuals who had stood by him, people he'd confided in, and yet, for reasons he struggled to comprehend, they had joined Josh in his scheme. One night, as Lucas went over the documents once more, he realized that this betrayal wasn't merely about money or power. It was a challenge to his very principles. Josh and those who had joined him weren't just trying to steal from him. They were attempting to dismantle everything he stood for, to take away not just his wealth, but his influence, his legacy. The irony was bitter. Here he was, a man of vast resources and connections, yet he felt stripped of the very foundation he'd built his life upon: loyalty, trust, and respect. This conspiracy was as much a moral blow as it was a financial one. But Lucas was not a man to be defeated easily. With the information in hand, he began to plan his response. He reached out to his legal team, carefully selecting only those he trusted implicitly, instructing them to prepare a legal case that would hold Josh and his co-conspirators accountable. But he knew that if he acted too hastily, Josh might find a way to shield himself from consequences. No, this had to be handled delicately, with every step measured and precise. As the days wore on, Lucas found himself reflecting on Sarah, the waitress who had risked her position to warn him. She had shown more courage and integrity than those closest to him. Her simple act of honesty setting in motion a chain of events that was now reshaping his life. In a way, Sarah's actions had restored a glimmer of hope, a reminder that loyalty and kindness still existed, even if they came from unexpected places. Her role in this story, though small on the surface, was pivotal, and Lucas felt a growing sense of gratitude toward her. He resolved to reach out to her soon, to thank her properly and perhaps offer her something more substantial in return. As Lucas continued to build his case, his resolve hardened. He knew he couldn't merely react with anger or vengeance. This situation required strategy, patience, and a clear mind. He would dismantle Josh's network piece by piece, exposing each collaborator and ensuring that they faced the consequences of their betrayal. It was no longer about the money. It was about restoring integrity, about setting an example for his company and proving that deception would not be tolerated. The betrayal had left Lucas bruised but not broken. If anything, it had steeled his determination to safeguard his business and the values he held dear. He would emerge from this ordeal wiser and stronger, and he would ensure that the lessons learned would echo throughout his company, creating a legacy of transparency and trust. In the quiet moments of his planning, Lucas realized that this was more than a personal struggle. It was a pivotal moment in his career. It was a test of his character, of his principles, and of his resilience. As painful as it was, he knew that overcoming this challenge would ultimately strengthen him, both as a leader and as a man. Lucas may be on the path to justice, but the hardest confrontation still awaits. In the next chapter, witness the intense showdown between Lucas and Josh, where deep-seated resentments come to light. Stay with us as Lucas faces his former friend in a battle of words, ideals, and principles. The day of the confrontation arrived, and the tension in the air was almost tangible. Lucas had chosen a setting that held significance for both him and Josh, an old conference room tucked away in the original wing of his corporate headquarters. This room was steeped in memories, a place where countless deals had been closed, strategies drawn, and visions shared between two men who, at one point, had thought they were on the same path. Lucas hoped that the echoes of their shared past would somehow evoke the honesty he was seeking from Josh. Deep down, perhaps, there was still a part of him that hoped for some explanation that would make sense of it all. Josh entered the room, his expression cool, but Lucas could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. Lucas remained silent, observing his former friend with a mixture of sadness and resolution. It was strange, he thought, how people could be so close and yet turn into strangers in a heartbeat. He watched Josh's gaze dart around the room, noting every detail as if it were a battlefield he was preparing to navigate. In many ways, it was. This was not just a business confrontation. It was a confrontation of character, loyalty, and the meaning of friendship itself. Without pleasantries, Lucas began by laying out what he had uncovered. He spoke in a calm, measured tone, his words carrying the weight of every piece of evidence he had collected. "I know, Josh," he said quietly, setting down a stack of documents in front of him. "I know about the offshore accounts, the false transactions, and the meetings behind my back. I know everything." For a moment, Josh said nothing, his face a blank canvas. He seemed to consider his options, deny, deflect, or maybe even come clean. But then, his expression shifted, and what Lucas saw, there wasn't remorse, but defiance, almost a smirk. It was as if Josh had decided that honesty was overrated, that he would go down swinging rather than admit defeat. "You think you know everything?" Josh finally replied, his voice laced with bitterness. "You don't know half of it, Lucas. You don't know what it's like to always be in someone else's shadow, to be the one doing all the work, making all the sacrifices while you sit on top and reap the rewards." Lucas felt a pang, but he held his ground. "I thought we were building this together, Josh," he said, his voice low but firm. "Every decision, every sacrifice, those were ours to share. If you felt differently, why didn't you say something?" Josh let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "Say something? And what would you have done, Lucas? Give me a pat on the back? Tell me I was doing a good job?" His voice grew harsher, tinged with resentment that had clearly been festering for years. "You never saw me as an equal. You've always seen yourself as the visionary, the one with all the answers. I was just the guy making it happen, the loyal friend who would stay by your side, no matter what." Lucas listened, absorbing each word. He felt a sadness deeper than anger, a sense of loss for the friendship he thought they'd shared. But he also saw that Josh had made choices driven by jealousy, greed, and a hunger for validation that had poisoned whatever bond they once had. "So this was about recognition?" Lucas asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "You were willing to betray everything we built just to feel like you weren't in someone's shadow?" "It's not just that," Josh replied, his tone defensive, almost wounded. "It's the way you never saw me, the way you took everything for granted. I did things you couldn't even dream of. You were so blinded by your success that you never noticed what was right under your nose. So yes, I took what I thought I deserved." Lucas stared at him, finally understanding that Josh's motivations went beyond business or money. This was personal, a deeply rooted resentment that had twisted Josh's view of their relationship, turning it into a competition only he was aware of. In Josh's mind, Lucas realized he had become the enemy, the obstacle in the way of his friend's unfulfilled ambitions. Lucas felt a surge of resolve. This wasn't just about his company anymore. It was about setting boundaries, about defining the values that he would stand for, even in the face of betrayal. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. "Josh, you had a choice. You could have come to me, shared your frustrations, and we could have worked through it. But you chose deceit. You chose to betray the trust we built. That's on you." Josh's face twisted into a grimace. He seemed on the verge of another retort, but then his shoulders slumped and a strange calm settled over him. "You're right," he admitted, though his tone was devoid of remorse. "I made my choice, and I'd do it again if it meant I didn't have to be in your shadow." There it was, the final admission, stark and unapologetic. Josh's loyalty had been contingent on his need for validation, a validation he'd chosen to pursue by destroying the very thing they had built together. Lucas felt a strange sense of closure. There would be no reconciliation, no resolution that healed their friendship. That friendship was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of their choices. The meeting concluded with a simple, almost curt exchange. Lucas informed Josh that legal actions were already in motion, that every measure was being taken to safeguard the company against any further interference. Josh accepted this with a grim nod, his expression unreadable. There were no apologies, no attempts at forgiveness, only the silence of two men who had once been brothers in ambition, now divided by mistrust and betrayal. As Josh left the room, Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle on him. This wasn't just the end of a business partnership. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in his life defined by shared dreams and ambitions. And though the decision to cut ties was painful, it was also liberating. Lucas had faced the truth, painful as it was, and he emerged stronger, more resilient, and more aware of the values he held dear. In the aftermath, Lucas found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned. Trust, he realized, was not a matter of convenience, but of integrity. It wasn't something that could be given lightly or taken for granted. Moving forward, he would ensure that his business and his life were built on foundations that could withstand the tests of time and betrayal. As he sat in his office, watching the city lights flicker against the evening sky, Lucas knew that this was only the beginning of a new journey. He had lost a friend, but he had gained clarity, a clarity that would guide him as he rebuilt, stronger and wiser than before. Lucas has faced the painful truth, but there are still challenges ahead. In the next chapter, we explore how Sarah's courage begins to reshape Lucas's future, leading him to make a choice that will forever change her life and leave a lasting impact on his own. In the days following his confrontation with Josh, Lucas found himself reflecting on the moments that had brought him to this point. The betrayal had left a wound that ran deep, but amid the turmoil, one thought stood out like a beacon of clarity: Sarah's courage. In a world where even those closest to him had chosen deceit, here was a young waitress who had risked everything to tell him the truth. She had nothing to gain, and by all rights, every reason to stay silent. Yet, she had spoken up, choosing honesty over convenience, empathy over indifference. Lucas knew he owed her more than gratitude. Her act of bravery had been the catalyst for exposing the truth and had given him the strength to confront it. Painful as it was, Sarah's actions represented something he now cherished more than ever: integrity. He began to realize that her presence in his life, however brief, had reminded him of the values he'd built his career on, values that perhaps he had allowed to slip in the pursuit of success. Determined to honor her courage, Lucas decided to reach out to Sarah. He arranged to meet her at the diner where she worked, choosing a quiet morning when he knew the place would be nearly empty. As he entered, the familiar aroma of coffee and the soft clinking of dishes brought a sense of comfort. There, standing by the counter, was Sarah, her posture confident but unassuming, completely unaware of the impact she'd had on his life. When she noticed him, Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to curiosity. He hadn't told her why he wanted to meet, only that he wanted to thank her personally. Lucas gestured to a booth near the window, and as they sat, he took a moment to observe her. She was young but held herself with a kind of quiet strength, a resilience that had become rare in his world. "Sarah," he began, his tone earnest, "I don't think I can ever fully express what your honesty has meant to me. Your courage stepping forward when you didn't have to saved me from a disaster I never saw coming. You didn't just protect my business, you reminded me of something far more important. So thank you." Sarah looked at him, slightly taken aback by the intensity of his words. "I was just doing what I thought was right," she replied, her voice steady. "I don't think I could have lived with myself if I'd kept quiet. I know it's not my place, but everyone deserves to know the truth, especially when they're being wronged." Her words, so simple yet so powerful, resonated with Lucas. He had spent years surrounded by people who were more concerned with what they could gain from him than with standing for anything real or meaningful. Yet, here was someone with no ulterior motives, a person who had acted purely out of compassion. In that moment, Lucas saw potential in Sarah that he suspected even she hadn't realized. Taking a deep breath, Lucas made a decision that would set both their lives on new paths. "Sarah, I have a proposition for you. I don't know what your plans are or if you've ever considered a career beyond this diner, but I'd like to offer you a position in my company. I believe you have the qualities that are rare and invaluable. I want people with integrity by my side, and I'd be honored if you'd consider joining us." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, her initial reaction one of shock. She looked down, collecting her thoughts, clearly overwhelmed by the offer. I don't know what to say, Mr. Lucas. I mean, I've never imagined myself working in a place like yours. I don't even have the right education for that kind of job." Lucas smiled, reassuring her. "You have the most important quality, Sarah: integrity. Skills can be taught, but character, that's something you either have or you don't. If you're willing, I'll make sure you have every opportunity to learn and grow, and I'll cover the cost of your education, should you wish to pursue it." The offer was one of genuine belief, a leap of faith in a person who had shown him that goodness still existed in unexpected places. Lucas saw in Sarah not only a dedicated worker, but someone who could bring a fresh perspective to his company, a perspective rooted in values that had become scarce in his life. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah nodded, a soft but resolute smile forming on her face. "If you believe I can do it, then I'll give it everything I've got. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. I won't let you down." With that, a new chapter began for both of them. Lucas made arrangements for Sarah to begin her training within the company, providing her with mentors and resources to ensure she was prepared for the new role. He took a personal interest in her development, checking in regularly, encouraging her, and supporting her through the inevitable challenges that came with learning the intricacies of a large corporation. Sarah's journey was not without its difficulties. Transitioning from a diner to the fast-paced corporate world was daunting, but she approached every task with humility and determination. She was aware of her lack of experience but refused to let it hold her back. She studied hard, asked questions, and put in the extra hours to prove to herself and to Lucas that his trust in her was well placed. Over time, Sarah's contributions began to catch the attention of her colleagues. Her attention to detail, her honesty, and her ability to see issues from a fresh perspective brought a positive energy to the team. Unlike many who had risen through the ranks solely by networking or impressing the higher-ups, Sarah's ascent was driven by hard work and genuine care for the people around her. She treated everyone with respect, regardless of their position, earning admiration and respect from all levels of the company. Lucas watched her progress with pride. Sarah's presence was a reminder of the principles he'd built his business on, principles that he had perhaps lost sight of in recent years. Her integrity had become a grounding force within the company, influencing others to act with greater transparency and respect. For Lucas, it was a form of redemption, a way to reconnect with the values he held dear but had seen erode in the high-stakes world of corporate success. The impact Sarah had on Lucas extended beyond business. Her presence encouraged him to reflect on his own choices, to reassess the kind of leader he wanted to be. He found himself spending more time getting to know his employees, listening to their concerns, and creating an environment that valued honesty and mutual respect. Sarah's courage and integrity had sparked a transformation in Lucas, one that would reshape not only his company, but also his personal philosophy. As months turned into years, Sarah's role within the company grew. She earned a promotion, then another, and eventually found herself in a leadership position, overseeing operations with the same dedication she had shown in her early days. Her journey became an inspiration to others, a story of how one act of courage could change lives in ways no one could predict. Lucas had given her an opportunity, but it was Sarah's strength, resilience, and unwavering honesty that had carried her forward. Through her, he was reminded of the power of empathy, of kindness, and of the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Sarah had brought light into a time of darkness, and for that, Lucas knew he would always be grateful. Lucas may have found a beacon of integrity in Sarah, but challenges still lie ahead. In the next chapter, We'll see how Sarah's rise in the corporate world opens doors to new opportunities and tests her values in ways she never anticipated. Stay tuned to witness how she handles the pressures of leadership and the impact of her journey on those around her. The years that followed were transformative, not just for Sarah, but for everyone who crossed her path within the company. When Lucas extended her that unexpected opportunity, she took it with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Aware that this was a rare chance, one she couldn't afford to waste, she faced her new life in the corporate world with the same humility, diligence, and compassion that had characterized her work at the diner. But now she carried a unique purpose: to bring integrity and empathy to an industry that often lacked both. Her early days were challenging. Sarah entered the corporate world as an outsider, surrounded by people with advanced degrees and years of experience in business. She had neither. Every board meeting, every strategy session, and every casual conversation reminded her that she was in uncharted waters. There were moments she felt intimidated, out of place, as if she were merely playing a role in someone else's life. But each time doubt crept in, she remembered Lucas's faith in her and the courage that had driven her to warn him in the first place. That courage became her compass, guiding her through the uncertainties and the intense learning curve she faced. Lucas ensured Sarah had a strong support network within the company. He assigned her a mentor, a seasoned executive named Lavra, who took Sarah under her wing, showing her the ropes of corporate life. Lavra had seen many promising talents come and go, but something about Sarah's authenticity struck her as special. Sarah's presence was refreshing, a reminder of the values Lavra herself had once held close before the corporate grind had, in some ways, dulled her idealism. Through Lavra's guidance, Sarah learned the intricacies of finance management and the importance of balancing profit with responsibility. She was not content to simply follow instructions. She studied diligently, often working late into the night to familiarize herself with every detail of the company's operations. In meetings, she took careful notes, observed every interaction, and absorbed the dynamics that made the company tick. Slowly but surely, she began to contribute ideas of her own, suggestions that were innovative but also grounded in practical understanding. Her colleagues noticed her dedication, and even those who had initially viewed her with skepticism began to appreciate her genuine approach. One of the first projects Sarah spearheaded was a review of the company's internal practices, something that others had dismissed as unnecessary bureaucracy. But for Sarah, the project was more than just a task. It was a chance to ensure that the company's values matched its actions. She poured her heart into the initiative, identifying areas where transparency could be improved and where employees could feel more valued. Her suggestions were simple yet effective, aimed at creating an environment where everyone, from interns to executives, felt respected. As her role expanded, Sarah became known for her ability to bridge gaps between departments, fostering a spirit of collaboration that had been missing for years. Unlike others who rose by positioning themselves strategically, Sarah's advancement came from her genuine desire to uplift those around her. Her sincerity inspired others, especially those who had once felt overlooked or undervalued within the corporate hierarchy. For them, Sarah became a symbol of hope, a reminder that success didn't have to come at the expense of one's values. Lucas watched her rise with a quiet pride. Sarah's influence on the company was profound, far-reaching in ways he hadn't anticipated. Employees began to adopt her approach, prioritizing honesty and respect in their interactions. The culture within the company shifted subtly, moving away from the cutthroat mentality that had once prevailed. Lucas himself felt revitalized, encouraged to engage more deeply with his employees and to foster an environment where they could thrive both personally and professionally. As Sarah's reputation grew, so did her responsibilities. Within a few years, she was overseeing international operations, a role that brought its own set of challenges. Traveling between countries, meeting with global partners, and managing diverse teams required a flexibility and resilience she hadn't fully developed yet. But Sarah approached each new challenge with the same open heart and diligent spirit that had carried her this far. She learned to adapt to cultural differences, to listen carefully before making decisions, and to build trust with her international colleagues, who quickly recognized her sincerity and integrity. Her success, however, did not come without sacrifices. There were long hours, missed family events, and personal relationships that suffered due to her demanding schedule. The work weighed on her at times, testing her resilience and her commitment to the path she had chosen. Yet, each time she questioned her journey, she reminded herself of her purpose to honor the trust Lucas had placed in her, and to be a force of positive change in an industry that so often prioritized profit over people. One evening, during a corporate retreat in New York, Sarah was invited to speak at a company-wide event, a moment she could hardly believe was real. Standing before hundreds of employees, she shared her journey, from her humble beginnings as a waitress to her current role in the company. She spoke candidly, without pretension, acknowledging the challenges she had faced and the people who had helped her along the way. Her story resonated deeply, reminding everyone present of the values that had brought them to the company in the first place. She ended her speech with a message that encapsulated her approach to both life and work. Success isn't about the title or the salary. It's about the difference you make and the lives you touch along the way. The applause was thunderous, not just for her words, but for the authenticity behind them. In that moment, Sarah felt the culmination of everything she had worked for, not as a personal achievement, but as a reflection of the journey that had transformed her from a waitress into a leader. The recognition was a validation of her dedication, but more importantly, it was a tribute to the courage she had shown on that fateful day when she'd chosen to warn Lucas. Lucas took the stage after her, and in his speech, he acknowledged Sarah's profound impact on both him and the company. Sarah reminds us that true leadership is rooted in empathy and courage, he said. She has shown us that integrity and success are not mutually exclusive, but rather, they are the foundation of a legacy worth building. His words moved Sarah deeply, reinforcing the bond of mutual respect and gratitude that had grown between them. Her journey became an inspiration, not just within the company, but in the wider corporate world. She was invited to speak at industry conferences, to share her perspective on leadership and ethics, a topic that resonated in a time when many companies were scrutinized for their lack of accountability. Sarah's presence reminded others of the power of integrity, of the simple truth that people could still succeed without compromising their values. Through it all, Sarah remained grounded. She knew her story was not just about personal ambition, but about the importance of standing up for what was right, of showing kindness and integrity even when it was difficult. Her journey had been shaped by people who believed in her, by Lucas, by her mentor Lavra, and by countless colleagues who had supported her along the way. And as she continued to grow, she was determined to be that person for others, to foster an environment where honesty and compassion were celebrated as strengths. Her rise in the corporate world was, in many ways, an unlikely story, a testament to the idea that courage and empathy could open doors and create paths, even in the most competitive environments. For Sarah, it was a journey of personal growth, of learning that success was not about climbing to the top, but about lifting others up alongside her. Sarah has achieved remarkable success, but as her influence grows, new threats emerge. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Josh's final act of defiance threatens to undo everything she and Lucas have built, challenging Sarah to stand strong in the face of yet another betrayal. Stay with us as we uncover the next chapter of loyalty, resilience, and the strength of character. As Sarah settled into her new role with greater confidence, Lucas felt that the company was finally on stable ground, with a renewed sense of purpose and integrity. Together, they had transformed the culture, creating an environment that valued transparency, respect, and mutual support. The wounds of betrayal had slowly healed, and for the first time in years, Lucas felt a deep sense of peace. But, as fate would have it, the past wasn't done with him yet. Months after the company's remarkable turnaround, Lucas received an anonymous letter. It was unsigned, written in precise, cold language that conveyed a single purpose: threat. The letter alluded to personal information about Lucas and the company, promising to reveal the truth, unless Lucas conceded to certain demands. It didn't take him long to guess who was behind it. Josh. He hadn't heard from his former friend since the legal fallout following their confrontation. But it seemed Josh wasn't ready to let go, even after the ruinous impact his previous actions had had on both himself and Lucas. Despite the precautions Lucas had taken to protect his company, Josh still harbored a deep resentment, and now, with nothing left to lose, he appeared more determined than ever to make Lucas pay. The letter hinted at fabricated accusations, veiled as insider knowledge, suggesting Lucas had engaged in unethical practices to climb to the top. It was a threat not only to Lucas's company, but to his personal reputation, and Josh knew exactly where to strike to cause the most harm. Lucas shared the letter with Sarah, hoping her insight might help him devise a response. Sitting across from him in his office, Sarah read the words carefully, her face becoming somber as she absorbed the implications. She'd seen firsthand the changes Lucas had made in his life and his business, the genuine dedication he had to fostering a positive, ethical environment. This threat wasn't just an attack on Lucas. It was an attack on everything they'd built together. "Do you think he'd actually go through with this?" Sarah asked, setting the letter down. "It sounds desperate, like he's hoping to scare you into a reaction." Lucas nodded. "Yes, but desperate people can be unpredictable. He knows exactly what he's doing. This isn't about money anymore. It's about trying to drag me down with him, to make me suffer the way he thinks I made him suffer." They both knew that a public accusation, however unfounded, could cause a significant disruption, potentially driving away investors and destabilizing the progress they'd worked so hard to achieve. It wasn't just about damage control. It was about protecting the trust and morale they had cultivated within the company. With a measured tone, Lucas looked at Sarah. "This has to be handled carefully. I want to make sure we don't just react, but respond in a way that preserves our integrity. Any misstep here could be disastrous." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, and after a moment's silence, she proposed an idea. "Let's confront him publicly, but not in a way that he expects. We need to gather our own evidence, our own truth, and present it in a way that leaves no room for doubt. If he wants to bring up the past, let's show him how we've grown from it." It was a bold move, one that would require thorough preparation and transparency. But Lucas saw the merit in her suggestion. By taking control of the narrative, they could disarm Josh's threat before it gained any traction. He knew this approach would require more than just clever strategy. It would need honesty, humility, and a willingness to face any skeletons in the closet openly. Lucas and Sarah set to work immediately. They reviewed years of records, scrutinizing each transaction and decision, ensuring there were no overlooked details that could be twisted against them. They enlisted the help of the legal team, who carefully prepared statements that outlined the company's evolution and the ethical measures Lucas had implemented since his confrontation with Josh. The preparation was grueling, but it reinforced the commitment they had to honesty and transparency. This wasn't just a defense, it was a reaffirmation of their values. Meanwhile, Lucas's team began monitoring Josh's activities, tracking his communications and any interactions he had that might reveal his next move. They discovered that Josh had been meeting with reporters, feeding them stories under the guise of insider information. Though the accusations he provided were speculative, they were inflammatory, crafted to raise suspicions and question Lucas's integrity. In a world where headlines often carried more weight than facts, it was clear Josh intended to damage Lucas's reputation through the court of public opinion. As news of the accusations began to surface, Lucas held a press conference with Sarah by his side. The atmosphere was tense. Reporters were eager, sensing a scandal, but Lucas remained calm. He stood at the podium and addressed the audience with a steady voice, prepared to confront the situation head-on. "There have been recent claims questioning the integrity of our company and its leadership," Lucas began, his gaze steady. "These claims are being made by an individual who has a history of betraying the very values he now accuses us of lacking. Today, I want to share with you the full story, not just as a defense, but as a statement of who we are and what we stand for." He outlined the steps the company had taken to uphold ethical practices, even sharing documents that showed the improvements in transparency and accountability they had implemented over the past years. He didn't shy away from acknowledging his past mistakes, nor did he try to paint a picture of perfection. Instead, he was open about the journey they'd undertaken, a journey of learning, of growth, and of facing challenges honestly. Sarah then took the podium, speaking with a quiet but firm conviction that captivated the audience. She recounted her experience, the day she'd first met Lucas, and the courage it had taken to tell him the truth. "Integrity is not about never making mistakes," she said, her voice steady. "It's about being willing to confront them, to learn from them, and to become better. That's what this company has done, and I can say that with pride because I've seen it firsthand." Their approach was refreshingly honest, and it resonated with the public. Instead of covering up the accusations or dismissing them as baseless, Lucas and Sarah had chosen transparency, showing that they had nothing to hide. It was a risk, but it paid off. The story of their resilience, of facing betrayal and emerging stronger, struck a chord with people who were tired of corporate scandals and deception. The media's response shifted, and public perception began to lean in Lucas's favor. But Josh wasn't finished yet. Frustrated that his attempts had failed, he took a more aggressive stance, threatening to leak forged documents and edited recordings to further damage Lucas's reputation. It was a dangerous escalation, and Lucas knew that this would require a decisive move. They couldn't allow Josh's vendetta to cast a shadow over everything they had built. Working with his legal team, Lucas prepared to file a restraining order against Josh, citing harassment and defamation. The evidence they gathered showed a pattern of malicious intent, enough to convince the court that Josh's actions were not only damaging, but dangerous. The restraining order effectively neutralized Josh's threat, placing legal restrictions on his ability to contact Lucas or anyone associated with the company. With Josh's final threat silenced, Lucas and Sarah took a moment to breathe, reflecting on the challenges they had overcome together. Josh's actions had been painful, a reminder that some wounds never fully heal. But through it all, Lucas had found strength in the support and loyalty of those who truly believed in him. And Sarah's unwavering integrity had not only saved the company, but had set an example that others could look up to. In the end, Josh's attempts to bring Lucas down had only served to strengthen the foundation of everything he and Sarah had built. They had faced betrayal, adversity, and malicious threats, yet they had come through with their values intact, their integrity unshaken. The ordeal left a lasting impact on Lucas, a final lesson that would forever shape his approach to life and business. He knew now that true success wasn't measured in wealth or power, but in the strength of one's character and the courage to stand up for what was right, even when the stakes were high. Asterisk, with Josh's threats behind them, Lucas and Sarah look forward to a future built on trust and shared values. In the next chapter, we'll see how their journey culminates in a grand celebration, marking a new beginning and honoring the courage and resilience that brought them here. Join us as we witness the inspiring conclusion to their remarkable story. Asterisk, months after the last threat had been neutralized, Lucas and Sarah found themselves at the heart of a celebration that few had ever imagined. The event was held in New York, a grand affair bringing together employees, partners, and friends from all around the world. The company was thriving, stronger than ever, and the mood in the room reflected a sense of renewal, a joy born from resilience and triumph over adversity. For Lucas, this evening was more than just a corporate gathering. It was a testament to everything they'd overcome, to the values that had carried them through their darkest times, and to the loyalty that had ultimately saved them. As guests mingled and celebrated, Lucas felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. He knew that this success was built not on his efforts alone, but on the dedication and integrity of people like Sarah, individuals who had stood by him when it mattered most, who had chosen honesty over convenience and compassion over self-interest. For Lucas, tonight was as much about honoring them as it was about celebrating his own achievements. The evening reached its pinnacle as Lucas took the stage, looking out over the crowd with a warm, appreciative smile. He could see familiar faces, colleagues, and friends who had been with him through the highs and lows. and newcomers who had been drawn to the company by its renewed reputation for integrity and excellence. He could feel the energy in the room, a collective anticipation as everyone waited to hear from the man whose journey had inspired so many. He began his speech with sincerity, reflecting on the company's transformation. "Tonight, we celebrate not only our success, but the values that have brought us here," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We have faced challenges that tested our integrity, and we have overcome them by standing together, by holding to our principles, and by believing in the power of honesty and respect." Lucas paused, allowing the words to settle, then turned his gaze to Sarah, who was seated in the front row, her expression proud yet humble. "There's one person here tonight whose courage changed the course of this company," he continued, gesturing toward her. "Sarah, you reminded us all of the importance of integrity, of the courage to stand up and speak the truth, even when it's difficult. Because of you, we are here, stronger and more united than ever. Thank you." The audience erupted in applause, and Sarah rose, her face a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Lucas's words had honored her more profoundly than any award or title could. This recognition was a culmination of her journey from waitress to corporate leader, a journey that had been marked by perseverance, honesty, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Moved by the applause, Sarah took a deep breath and joined Lucas on stage. She felt the weight of the moment, the significance of standing here as someone who had once doubted her place in this world. But now, with Lucas beside her and the company's support behind her, she felt a renewed confidence, a sense of purpose that transcended titles or accolades. When the applause subsided, she spoke, her voice clear and filled with conviction. "Thank you, Lucas, and thank you to everyone here. I never imagined that one choice to speak up, to share the truth would lead me here. But what I've learned is that each of us has the power to make a difference, no matter where we start. Success isn't about where you come from or what you have. It's about the choices you make, the courage to stand up for what you believe in, and the strength to support each other along the way." Her words resonated, stirring a sense of purpose and inspiration throughout the room. She had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the fact that character and integrity could indeed carve out a path to success. She had earned her place through actions, through a relentless dedication to authenticity, and by embodying the very values that Lucas had spent his life advocating. As the night wore on, Lucas and Sarah found themselves surrounded by colleagues and friends, each expressing their admiration and gratitude. The event continued with laughter, stories, and a shared sense of accomplishment. For Lucas, it was a reminder of why he had started this journey, of the dreams he had once shared with a friend, and the unexpected paths that had led him here. In a quiet moment, Lucas looked over at Sarah and said, "You know, I used to think that success was about building something big, something that people would remember. But now I realize that true success is about building something good, something that brings out the best in people." Sarah smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. Their journey had taught them both that legacy wasn't about wealth or power, but about the lives they touched and the values they upheld. As the night drew to a close, Lucas made one final announcement, inviting everyone to raise a glass in honor of the company's future. "To new beginnings," he said, lifting his glass. "May we continue to build with integrity, to lead with compassion, and to inspire others as we have been inspired. Here's to the journey we've shared and the bright future that awaits." The crowd raised their glasses, toasting to a new era for the company, one built on lessons learned, values strengthened, and relationships that had been tested but never broken. Asterisk, as this chapter closes, we invite you to join us on our own journey by subscribing to our channel.